Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Rakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure unto the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson, and I'm going to start it off in Micah chapter 4, verse 1. And the header on the blue letter Bible reads, "Peaceful latter days." Keep that in mind. "But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it." And this is talking about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Israel being established and being the sole authority and rulership in that day. And in the scriptures, mountains and hills can represent bigger governments and smaller governments. Verse 2, "And many nations, many heathen nations shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh and to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem." And in that day, the whole earth is going to be governed by the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High found in the scriptures. And these heathen nations are going to flow unto the Israelites to learn, how to follow the laws. Verse 3, "And he shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." And that's another thing. When the kingdom of heaven is established, these heathen nations aren't going to be making weapons or fighting wars anymore. Now, with all this being said, do you clearly see this taking place over in the Holy Land right now? Or this entire planet being governed by the laws, statutes, and commandments? Or the people following after them? Of course not. That is because those people over in the Holy Land are not the true children of the Most High. The true children of Israel are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, who are still currently in captivity, while those people over there are of the nation of Esau, Edom, or these so-called white people, specifically the tribe of Amalek. And, for one, they've got a parliament and a voting system that's separate from the scriptures. Tel Aviv is known as a pink city, and it's one of the pride hotspots on the face of the earth. And they're currently involved with a war in Gaza. And then, of course, you've got the war in Ukraine and, just conflicts all across the planet. But this leads me to the first article I'll be going to in this lesson on the peoplesvoice.tv, just to further disprove that those people over in the Holy Land, those 1948ers, do not fit the prophecies that would deal with what the children of Israel would be doing and going through when they were back in the Holy Land. But the title of this article from the People's Voice is IDF soldiers testified they are ordered to shoot Palestinian children seeking food and water. As bodies pile up around Gaza's aid trucks, 1948er soldiers are breaking ranks, telling Haaretz they were ordered to open fire on unarmed civilians, including children, desperately trying to collect food. So, hey, clear cut right off the bat. War is still taking place, and violence and, military weapons are being made and being used. And, with these 1948ers shooting on unarmed men, women, and children in the old, hey, that's just in the spirit of those Amalekite Edomites to be cowards and go after the defenseless. They did it to the children of Israel, the real children of Israel, when they came out of Egypt during the Exodus. As it says in Deuteronomy 25, verses 17 to 18, "Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when ye were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, and smote the hindmost of thee, those in the back, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not the Most High. And, in this caravan, you had the men, the warriors up front, in case an enemy came from the front. And towards the back, what did you have? The weak, the feeble, the elderly, the women and the children. And that's who Amalek decided to attack. Fast forward to today, hey, the spirit of Amalek is subject to Amalek. He's still in his cowardly nature. The new report in the 1948 newspaper included testimonies from several IDF soldiers and officers who described a daily operation that opened fire on civilians, seeking aid as a method of dispersal, despite the civilians posing no threat. It's a killing field, one soldier told Haaretz. Where I was stationed, between 1 and 5 people were deleted every day. They're treated like a hostile force. No crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable. Heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars. Then once the center opens, the shooting stops and they know they can approach. Our form of communication is gunfire. It's so much for beating your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks, and nations not fighting against nations. Thousands of Gazans come to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for aid distribution sites daily as one of the only lifelines for food in the area, but the sites are only open for 1 hour each morning, and soldiers routinely fire into the crowds before and after they open to disperse them, according to Haaretz. And, as I said, these sites are one of the only lifelines for food in the area. So, you got a lot of these people coming up. They're starving. They're hungry. They're feeble. They're weak. Just like those that were in the back of that caravan in Deuteronomy 25, speaking of when Israel came out of Egypt and Amalek, like the cowards that they are, attacked from the rear. We open fire early in the morning if someone tries to get in line from a few hundred meters away, and sometimes we just charge at them from close range. But there's no danger to the forces, the anonymous soldier said. I'm not aware of a single instance of return fire. There's no enemy, no weapons. JTA report. One anonymous senior officer familiar with the fighting in Gaza told Haaretz that the indiscriminate firing of civilians went against everything the army is supposed to stand for. The fact that live fire is directed at a civilian population, whether with artillery, tanks, snipers, or drones, goes against everything the army is supposed to stand for, the senior officer said. Why are people collecting food being deleted just because they stepped out of line or because some commander doesn't like that they're cutting in? Why have we reached a point where a teenager is willing to risk his life just to pull a sack of rice off a truck, and that's who we're firing artillery at? During the meeting of the 1948 Military Advocate General and the IDF General Staff's fact-finding assessment mechanism, senior officers in the IDF asserted that the incidents were isolated and that fire was directed at individuals who posed a threat to troops. But representatives of the Advocate General's office rejected the IDF's claims, according to Haaretz. The claim that these are isolated cases doesn't align with incidents in which grenades were dropped from the air and mortars and artillery were fired at civilians, said one legal official. This isn't about a few people being deleted. We're talking about dozens of casualties every day. So that's it with this article. Hey, you Amalekites, don't fit any of the prophecies dealing with what the children of Israel would be doing when they were back in the land, but you do fit the prophecies dealing with what Esau would do in regards to the Holy Land. This is Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen and against all Idumea, which is just the Greek way of saying Edom, which have appointed my land into their possession by laying the groundwork with the Balfour Declaration after World War I, and then further cementing the deal with the help of the U.S. and the United Nations after World War II with the 1948 Declaration of Independence. And then immediately you had the Arab, Israeli war, later on the 6 Days War, and many wars from then all the way up until now. And World War III hasn't even taken place yet. Which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds to cast it out for a prey. Now, I'm going to go to my second bit of information from TRT World Now's YouTube channel. Growing numbers of 1948er troops taking their own lives. And here's another discrepancy with you 1948ers fit in prophecy. Because when the children of Israel were back in the Holy Land, as we read in Micah chapter 4, there would be peace in the world and especially amongst the children of Israel. This is Isaiah chapter 60, verse 18. Violence shall no more be heard in thy land, which is clearly not the case. That war in Gaza, those Iranian missile strikes on the land, wasting nor destruction within thy borders, but thou shalt call thy walls salvation and thy gates praise. Isaiah 65 and 19. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and join my people, and the voice of weeping shall no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. And as we're going to clearly see in this clip, weeping and crying is being heard in the land, especially amongst, these IDF soldiers who are deleting themselves because they can't, deal with fighting this war anymore. And a lot of them are seeing the futility in it. And a lot of them are getting nervous that they're going to be tried for war crimes. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And I'm going to play the first couple of minutes or so of it.
For further analysis, we're joined by Anthony Lowenstein. He is an independent journalist, author of Palestine Laboratory, and was based in occupied East Jerusalem between 2016 and 2020. Anthony, hello, thank you for your time. So as we just heard in Christina's report, she laid out quite well, there's a growing number of suicides among Israeli soldiers. From your perspective, what does that reveal about the culture within the IDF and the immense pressure, I guess, this conflict is putting even on its own troops?
Like, on the one hand, there's a major crisis in the IDF. What I mean by that is not just the suicides, which obviously are increasing, which is not dissimilar, I might add, to a very long war in Iraq and Afghanistan for the US. Over the years, a lot of American soldiers questioned the morale and what they were actually doing in those two countries, and they realised that the war was futile. In Israel, you have a similar situation. The Gaza situation is unresolved, it's never ending. It's a genocide without end. And so on the one hand, you have a lot of soldiers who are disillusioned. There's not enough support for IDF soldiers, but more broadly, let's put that under some context. None of this is to do with suddenly caring about Palestinians. The vast majority of Israelis, including in the military, who are calling for the end of the war in Gaza, aren't doing it because they care about Palestinian civilians who are being killed at least 100 a day. They're realising, as many of us have said for nearly 2 years,
violence shall no more be heard within thy borders, weeping nor crying within thy lands.
That this war essentially is all about Netanyahu and his political coalition. That's all. So after 22 months plus, there are still Hamas fighters, there's still a conflict going on. It's now an insurgency, really. And the roughly 20 or so surviving Israeli hostages inside Gaza, the lives of them is clearly expendable, because if they go into Gaza City fully, there's a good chance those hostages will not survive.
Anthony, in your book, The Palestine Laboratory, you highlight how Israel exports its military model to the world. I wonder if you see the psychological toll on its own soldiers as part of the hidden costs of this system.
Well, the short answer is yes. And I mean, I've spoken to a number of Israeli soldiers over the year, long before October 7, but certainly since, who are those who are opposed to the war, even those, in fact, who supported it initially after October 7. And when Israel exports technology, surveillance, and weapons, and I might add that industry is thriving. Just a few weeks ago, Israel announced a massive multi-billion-dollar deal with Serbia. There are contracts being announced all the time. So the laboratory itself has proven.
Hey, so not only are these nations still fighting each other and not making military weapon and still making military weapons, hey, these 1948ers are a major weapons exporter. Another clear cut to you, though, it lines up with Edomites with prophecy. That red horse in Revelation 6 that was given the great sword to take peace from the earth, and Esau's blessing in Genesis 27. One of his blessings, the sword. But, when the true children of Israel are back in the land, beginning with the elect, let's see what they would be doing in regards to weaponry. If they would be signing multi-billion-dollar deals and exporting. This is Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 9 to 10. And, this is after the battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat. The War of Armageddon, the final confrontation of World War III over in Western Asia, which people refer to as the Middle East. And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows and the handstaves and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years. So the Israelites, beginning with the elect, would be destroying, these leftover weaponry from that battle. Rifles, tanks, artillery pieces, grenades, etc., etc. Verse 10, so that they shall take no wood out of the field, neither cut down any out of the forests, for they shall burn the weapons with fire. And if they're not kindling the fire, how are they going to burn those weapons? Burning that steel and that metal with spiritual powers, which is another thing. When the children of Israel are ruling in the kingdom of heaven, they're going to have spiritual powers, which we can clearly see that these Amalekite Edomites don't have that. Hence why they got to rely on, the Iron Dome and the David's slingshot anti-missile defense system. And here's another thing. And they shall spoil those that spoiled them and rob those that robbed them, saith the Lord Yahweh. And the Israelites are going to, put the remaining heathens into slavery so they can build up the kingdom of heaven for the first 1,000 years of it.
Proven itself, in inverted commas, in Gaza, where the
I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan.
Exports of Israeli weapons has never been higher. However, the human toll on Israeli soldiers is a given. The human toll, let's face it, more importantly, on Palestinians is far higher. And just a few days ago, the former head of Israeli military intelligence, in a leaked conversation just a few weeks ago, said essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, and this gives you a flavour of the kind of mainstream Israeli Jewish view of how they view Palestinians in Gaza. What he said was, and again I'm paraphrasing, something like, for every Israeli killed, huge numbers of Palestinians need to die, and what Palestinians need is an ongoing Nakba catastrophe, ongoing on and on and on. Essentially a call for genocide. That is a deep...
We'll leave it there. As that Amalekite said, for every 1948er killed, many Palestinians need to be deleted. Here's another thing. When the children of Israel are ruling in the kingdom of heaven, not only are they going to have spiritual powers, but they will be immortal. Let's get back to these precepts. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I'm going to read verses 50 to 57. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of the Most High, neither doth corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I shew you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Beginning with the elect getting beamed up onto those chariots, which, those chariots, which people ignorantly refer to as so-called UFOs, defy, man's understanding of physics. For them to do those turns and maneuvers and go from one realm of existence to another, a mortal body can't be in it. So when the elect get beamed up onto those chariots, they're going to be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption. These defiled, fleshly bodies filled with GMO foods and microplastics and these ailments must put on incorruption. Those eternal, immortal bodies. And as it said, the dead shall be raised incorruptible. Those of the elect who passed away on this side, we're going to meet them in the air on the chariots. Abaratazah, I'm of that number. And this mortal must put on immortality, point blank, period. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. And in these bodies, no matter how much we try to follow the laws, statutes, and commandments to the best of our ability, these bodies are just wicked and go off. But in the kingdom of heaven, we will be able to follow the laws, statutes, and commandments with those immortal bodies. And that goes into, truly being under the new covenant, when the laws, statutes, and commandments are going to be in our inward parts. And as it said, the sting of death is sin. Sin leads to death. So if you're no longer sinning, you're immortal. And the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to the Most High, which giveth us the victory through our Lord, Yahawashi Hamashiach, which, those Amalekites don't even acknowledge the Messiah. But, the Messiah didn't come for them. He came for his people, beginning with the elect, and then the wicked of our people that are judged and cut off on this side. When they're reborn through the loins of the elect, they're automatically going to be in the new covenant as well, with those new spiritual bodies, with the laws, statutes, and commandments in them. Immortal. This is Hebrews chapter 8. I'm going to read verses 7 to 11. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second, which we clearly see our people weren't able to follow that first covenant, even when they were in their own land. So how much more when we're in captivity, under the laws of the heathens? For finding fault with them, he saith, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, so-called Latinos and Native Americans, and with the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, so-called Black, African American, Negro, Haitian, West Indian, all 12 tribes together, which is beginning with the elect from all 12 tribes coming together. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a power, and they shall be to me a people. The nation of Israel, putting off mortality for the immortality, and having the laws, statutes, and commandments hardwired into our spirits to where we have no possibility of going off. And, that for one shows we're not under the new covenant. And verse 11, further seals the deal. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. And the prophets are still out here, preaching unto our people to wake up the elect. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. Because when the Israelites are ruling in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to have the law, statutes, and commandments in us, and all Israel will ultimately be saved and righteous. And I'm going to close it out in Ecclesiasticus, or Sirach in the Apocrypha, chapter 19, verse 19. The knowledge of the commandments of the Lord is the doctrine of life, and they that do things that please him shall receive the fruit of the tree of immortality. And when we're going to have the commandments of the Lord in us, we're no longer going to sin, which death is the sting of sin. So what? We're going to be immortal with those spiritual bodies. So, there won't be any Israelites deleting themselves because of PTSD, and damn sure no heathens out here deleting Israelites. But that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharella, and until next time, Shalom.